series is about me growing up as a millennial and being a huge wrestling fan. My earliest memory of the WWF goes back to 1985 when I was only 3 years old, and I watched a cartoon called Hulk Hogan's Rocket Wrestling. The show featured wrestlers from the golden era of the WWF, such as Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. I also remember owning some of the LJ and action figures. I loved the WWF golden era, and I became a wrestling fan at the time. In this episode, I'm going to explain my favorite wrestlers across different eras, from my childhood and even into my adult years. Throughout the 80s and mid-90s, no wrestler was more popular than Hulk Hogan. I was a small child in the 80s, and Hogan was my first favorite. I had the action figure, watched the cartoon, and rooted for Hogan during his big matches. One of my best memories of him was during WrestleMania 7 when he faced Sergeant Slaughter for the WWF Championship. He later went on to WCW where he did a heel turn at Bash at the Beach 1996 and became the leader of the NWO. The faction was interesting because they were bad guys, but they were cool. I had never seen a group like that before. Another great moment was during WrestleMania 21 when Hogan did a surprise run-in the night after his Hall of Fame induction. The Ultimate Warrior was one of the most intense wrestlers, and he became almost as popular as Hulk Hogan back in the early 90s. One of my best memories of him was at WrestleMania 6 where he faced Hogan. After the match, Hogan handed the belt to the Warrior and they hugged at the end. It was unusual at the time because I had never seen two opponents hug after a hard-fought match. I also remember the Warrior's return to WrestleMania 8 after being gone for over half a year. People went crazy as his music played and he sprinted out to the ring to help Hogan. In 1996, he made another return, and they mentioned he had published a comic book and opened a wrestling school. He put the address on the screen and I wrote him a letter. A few weeks later, I got an envelope in the mail with his comic book. I was excited at the time because I got a gift from the Ultimate Warrior. I consider Randy Savage to be the all-time greatest wrestler. He was everything you want a wrestler to be. A great athlete in the ring, a great talker on the mic, he had a great look and a great entrance. An outstanding talent with amazing charisma. One of my favorite moments involving Randy was during WrestleMania 7 when he was reunited with Elizabeth, and people in the audience were crying and applauding. WrestleMania 4 was also great when he faced 4 opponents that night and won the WWF title. Jake the Snake Roberts is one of the most memorable characters from the golden era. I remember hearing that chilling music as he would walk out to the ring while carrying a python in a green bag. He would hold up that big snake and often chase other wrestlers with it. His promos were different because he didn't yell like other wrestlers, but he just spoke softly and sounded like a philosopher. The Big Boss Man was an occupational gimmick who fit in at the time of the golden era. He started as a heel but later became a heroic good guy in uniform and would talk about law, order, and justice. He returned as a heel during the Attitude Era with a darker image which was consistent with the direction of that era. Demolition is my all-time favorite tag team. With the masks and makeup, they look like a menacing duo. They wrestled at a time when the tag team division was really good in the WWF. My favorite Demolition moment was during WrestleMania 6 when they won the tag team belts, and the audience was going crazy. Later they added a third member known as Crush, a replacement for Axe who was having medical problems at the time. The Hart Foundation was another great tag team. They were originally heels and managed by Jimmy Hart, but later went on to be one of the top babyface teams. One of my memories of them was during SummerSlam 1990 when they wrestled Demolition for the tag team belts. The Legion of Doom is one of the most legendary tag teams. Hawk and Animal looked like action movie characters with spiky shoulder pads and face paint. He had some of the best promos in the tag team division and inspired many clones over the years. The New Generation era lasted from 1993 to 96. It was a time when Golden Era wrestlers were being replaced by younger talent. This era often gets criticized for being a downturn in the business, but there were many big stars that can be appreciated from that time. One of my favorites at the time was Bret Hart. He became the most successful wrestler from the Hart family. After leaving the tag team division, he went on to become the Intercontinental Champion and later the WWF World Champion. I liked his entrance music and unique style in the ring. I often thought Bret is underrated. People may not rank him at the top of guys like Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan, but I can still consider Bret to be one of the best. Doink was an evil clown who would play tricks on his opponents. He was an odd character because he had body doubles and his role was played by 3 different wrestlers. Matt Borne was the original Doink. He had a prior run in the company and appeared in a match at WrestleMania 1 where he wrestled Rick Steamboat. Diesel started his WWF career as a bodyguard for Shawn Michaels. Later, he went on to win the WWF Championship and held the title for close to a year. I was a fan in 1995 when he was facing one opponent after another. One of my favorite moments of him is when he showed up in WCW and started the NWO with Scott Hall and Hulk Hogan. Razor Ramon was another one of my favorites during the New Generation era. I remember the matches he had with Shawn Michaels and Diesel. He looked like he was dripping with gold when he had the Intercontinental belt around his waist and gold chains around his neck. He was also a founding member of the NWO along with Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash. Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig was an outstanding talent and one of the most athletic wrestlers during the Golden Era and the New Generation. He looked great with bright-colored outfits and an intercontinental title around his waist. I remember his matches with Bret Hart and Brutus Beefcake, and he was also managed by Bobby Heenan. He later showed up in WCW and became a member of the NWO. The Headshrinkers were one of the top tag teams during the New Generation era. They came from one of the biggest wrestling families, and the next generation after the Wild Samoans. I remember their alliance with Captain Lou Albano as they faced the Quebecers for the tag team titles. I had first seen Vader from watching WCW in the mid-90s, and then he debuted in the WWF during the 1996 Royal Rumble. Vader was like a wrecking ball and would pummel his opponents in the ring. His height was 6'5" and he weighed 450 pounds, and it was impressive to see a man of his size doing backflips off the top rope. I remember watching The Undertaker's debut during the Survivor Series 1990, and I knew from the beginning he was something unique. He had a long career lasting 30 years in the WWE, and is remembered by many as the greatest character in wrestling history. There are so many things that stand out about The Undertaker, from his WrestleMania winning streak lasting over 20 years, to his coffin matches, buried alive, and last ride matches. Just like The Undertaker, his brother Kane is also one of the most memorable characters. I loved his debut at Bad Blood 1997, and his career spanned throughout the Attitude Era and Ruthless Aggression Era. Whether he was an enemy or a tag team partner to The Undertaker, I loved watching them work together. I'll always remember Kane as one of the greatest monsters in wrestling history. I first discovered ECW back in 1996, and I instantly became a fan. I'd been watching the WWF since the late 80s and found WCW in the early 90s, but I had not seen anything like ECW. It was hardcore, profane, raunchy, and gritty. One of my favorite ECW wrestlers was Taz. Before Suplex City, Taz was known as the Human Suplex Machine. He was a muscular guy, and I loved his debut in the WWF. Remember when he returned to ECW to face Mike Awesome for the ECW title? It was historic because Taz was contracted to the WWF, and Mike Awesome was with WCW. But they returned to wrestle for the ECW World Championship. Three companies were cooperating to make the match happen. Sandman is one of the most beloved wrestlers from ECW. He used the Singapore cane as his weapon, and had one of the best entrances in which he would come out to Metallica's hit song in a Sandman, and would chug beer during the entrance. I was at an ECW show in Hamburg, Pennsylvania back in the spring of 1998, and I stood about 10 feet away from the Sandman, Tommy Dreamer, and Spike Dudley as the Sandman chugged beer while the music played. It remains as one of my best memories of being a wrestling fan. Rob Van Dam was one of the most athletic wrestlers. He had a martial arts style and used the name Van Dam because he resembles Jean-Claude Van Damme. He debuted in the WWF and became known as Mr. Monday Night. I remember his title win at One Night Stand in 2006 when he beat John Cena for the WWE Championship. I think of Sabu as the Evel Knievel of wrestling. He was known for doing spectacular jumps and flips. His matches were always exciting because of his high-flying style. He was a friend of RVD, and both were trained by Sabu's uncle, the Sheik. I remember Sabu and RVD as two of the most athletic wrestlers in ECW. I consider the Dudley Boys to be one of the greatest tag teams. They began in a faction and emerged as the best tag team in ECW. They debuted in WWF and had some great TLC matches with Edge, Christian, and the Hardy Boys. I don't have many favorite wrestlers from the 2010s, but I was a huge fan of Bray Wyatt and the Wyatt family. Bray was one of the most creative and charismatic wrestlers in history, and his death was a big loss for wrestling fans. I loved everything Bray, Harper, and Rowan did, including the Bludgeon Brothers, The Fiend, and the Funhouse, along with Brody as the leader of the Dark Order. The Fiend was my favorite version of Bray. He was one of the darkest and most menacing characters.